Are we ready?
Ready.
Okay.
Password.
So I'm going to call the special select board meeting of Wednesday, February 28th to order. And the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I do have an addition at 1A, is approval of 10 parking spaces allocated for voting Tuesday, March 6th, that Ann's going to bring before us. Are there any other recommended changes? Hearing none, I'll also point out that we do have a executive session scheduled. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. We're scheduled for a public hearing tonight. We're going to do that first on the agenda. In accordance with 24 VSA, Section 4442, tonight the Select Board is conducting a public hearing to take testimony regarding amendments to the Middlebury zoning and subdivision regulations that have been proposed and approved by the Middlebury Planning Commission. In a moment, I will open the hearing, and Planning and Zoning Director Jennifer Murray will begin reviewing the proposed updates to the zoning and subdivision regulations. Because this is an official public hearing, if members of the public have a question or comment after being recognized by the chair, please come up to the microphone, state your first and last name for the record, and then direct your feedback to the Select Board so that we accurately capture it for the minutes for this meeting and those watching on MCTV. Viewers can hear you clearly. Following tonight's hearing, the Select Board will consider whether to adopt the amended zoning and subdivision regulations, either as presented or with additional non-material amendments that the Board elects to make as a result of the community's input. If the Board votes to adopt the regulations by statute, the amended regulations will become effective 21 days after adoption, unless a petition requesting additional consideration at a special town meeting signed by 5% of the qualified voters is received within 20 days. We've scheduled 20 minutes for this hearing, and since there are a number of other items on the agenda that the board needs to address tonight, we're going to do our best to hold to that time frame. And with that, I declare the public meeting to discuss the draft 2017 Middlebury Town Plan to be open, and we'll now turn the floor over to Jen Murray. Good evening.
Can I sit here so that I can present to them?
Sure. Right, so just make sure she has a mic so that they pick it up on the viewers.
Otherwise, my back's to the audience the whole time. So, yep, as Brian explained, we had a hearing with the Planning Commission back in September, and now this is the hearing on the Select Board level to approve these zoning amendments that were developed by the Planning Commission last year. This is just a quick batch of zoning amendments. It's largely things that I put together from my experience in the last couple years being here, things that we've had trouble in our office feeling was clear, things that we were having to make subjective judgments about a little bit in the planning office. It's just kind of clarifying things to make our process easier. And then also different things that the DRB came across that they thought needed a little clarification. So that's kind of the main gist of the regulation changes we're proposing here. There's no changes being proposed to the zoning map. That's often people's first question for me. Are there changes to the map? No map changes, just wording changes. I think we could probably just get right into the body of the changes. I'll try to go through them quickly and efficiently. Feel free to stop me, Brian, if you think I should, clarify anything else. Okay. So the first section in our zoning regulations are the definitions, and so there were several definitions that needed to be added or clarified. So is this the document that? What's the name of this document?
This is the summary of zoning changes.
Okay.
You want this one?
Yeah, there's another one too, called compilation. Yes. So if we scroll down in that, we'll be able to see the red line changes. I think it's helpful. There we go. So you'll see in section 320, there were several little wording changes to definitions. We also added a definition for motel, and we combined the definition of inn with hotel. So now it's hotel inn, so that it tracks easier in the table of uses. And that's really it for the definitions section. Section 510, what requires a permit? This is an interesting section in the zoning because it explains what things are exempt from requiring a permit. We wanted to clarify that Airbnbs would be exempt. So for now, we're going to try this. Rental of 2 or fewer rooms within an owner-occupied single-family home would be exempt from needing a permit. We often have people who need to rent a room or two on Airbnb and they wonder if they need a permit. Now I can safely say no. And this, of course, is helpful for affordable housing in general because it helps people defray their housing costs. Section 520, the application and administrative review process. These are just a couple, Roman numeral 3 and 4 have been added to that section just to clarify these things. This is how we administer things now. It just explains to people what they need to provide to our office a little bit better for the permit application. Section 540 is our conditional review process. So in this section, we added that resumption of discontinued conforming uses require conditional use review. This was something that I was doing anyway, but if you have a discontinued conforming use and you want to resume that discontinued use, it would require a review because we often need to look at things like traffic and circulation and parking because those things change over time and we need to make sure they're the same for the new owner. We clarified what sorts of things can be exempt from hearings. There, now we currently have administrative approvals for granting setback waivers for small sheds, for instance. That's how we administer it now. So this just clarifies that. Section 550 is the planned unit development review process. Roman numeral 2 required a little bit more clarification in terms of what projects the DRB could require to be reviewed as a PUD. Usually it's the other way around. Usually applicants want to be reviewed as a PUD because there's additional benefits for having a PUD review. But just in case the tables are ever turned and we need to require people to do a PUD, the DRB now understands exactly what kinds of projects they can require that for. Section 564, we get countless questions from surveyors about what needs to be provided for a signature block on the plat. So I feel really great about the possibility of having this in our zoning now, so I can just cut this sheet out and hand it to surveyors. And I worked with Ann on this to make sure it's exactly what she needs in her office too. The next section is the dimensional requirements. And the Planning Commission could have fun making changes in this table all day, but we controlled ourselves. And there's only one small change, and that's in the central business district where we're sitting tonight. The side setback is increased from 0 feet to 5 feet. But in the setback waiver section, the DRB can grant a waiver to bring it back down to 0 feet. So we're not making businesses unable to build touching the wall of a business in the central business district. They just need DRB permission to do it now. And 5 feet seems more reasonable to us. Just for fire and safety considerations, I'd like people not to just be able to build with no space between buildings by right. They should be talking to the DRB to see if there's any other considerations. So section 705, there's been confusion in the past about what this section says. This just literally reorganizes and rewords it. And it clarifies that a maximum of 3 lots without frontage may be served with any right of way. And that's critical to point out because so that's critical to point out because before it wasn't clear if people could have lots that didn't have frontage. But it only makes sense to have a cul-de-sac or a driveway with a few lots at the end that might not have frontage. It's kind of important to being able to cluster your density, and not just have chopped up lots all along a road. So this just sort of codifies that principle of good growth design. So this is that section 724 setback waivers that I refer to. You see that now there's red language that says in the central business district, it could be less than 5 feet. Yep, so that's what that is. The next section was a big change that we're particularly proud of, and it's accessory apartments. I was getting a lot of feedback from people that they thought that the threshold, the size threshold for accessory apartments was too small. It was based just on the state statute, which tells you that an accessory apartment could be 400 square feet or 30% of the total floor area of your primary dwelling, whichever is larger. And people said, geez, we wish we could have more than 400 square feet. So the Planning Commission talked about it for a long time, and we bumped up the 400 to 850 square feet, or 30% of the primary dwelling, whichever is larger. And you could talk about it all day. We did, like probably 3 or 4 times. So we just feel like this is a good place to start. We think it's really reasonable, and we can see where it goes from here. We'll know from the feedback that we're getting from people if we have it calibrated correctly. We do clarify that we're going to need to get a certificate of occupancy for accessory apartments. That wasn't in there before, but it was a practice that we were following anyway. Dwellings in the forest zone. So we have a forest district, and the forest district has a minimum lot size of 25 acres, which is a lot larger than the rest of our districts. There's some general intent in the language describing the forest zone that you want to preserve these large forest blocks, while also making sure that you preserve the rights of foresters to be able to responsibly manage and harvest from these lots. And so the DRB reviewed a couple proposals this year that were in the forest zone, and I felt like, I was hearing that they wanted a little more clarification of what they might be allowed to do. So while the beginning of that red language is just rewording what's been crossed out to make it clearer, what we do add to this section is that a forestry management plan may be required by the DRB, and they may be requiring a little bit more special stormwater control, because we worry in that district about runoff because there's a lot of steep slopes in the forestry district. So the Planning Commission did make those mays instead of shalls. We're going to give it a little time and see if a shall is more appropriate there, but that's what we've done to buck up that section. So the next section is landscaping and screening, and that section was very small, and yet it's a section that we use a lot. It's a little, yes. So the landscaping and screening section was really small. It was like very kind of open-ended and vague about what would be required for landscaping and screening. So the Planning Commission looked over some recommendations that I gave them that were compiled from several other towns that have more specific landscaping regulations. And we have this here. This section was also reviewed by the tree committee, and they actually dug up several of these definitions, which I think really help clarify this section. So you'll see now it's more specific about what constitutes a buffer, what we mean by shade and shade trees, and what their usefulness is. That's Roman numeral 5. Roman numeral 6 actually gives you some metrics for how much internal parking lot landscaping we want to require for new development. Section 7 actually provides some tree planting specifications, and we specify maybe how the spacing should look on these trees along streets. We throw in some prohibited species here because no one should be planting ash right now, and there's other invasive species that could potentially turn up in landscaping. So we have a list now to protect ourselves from unsuitable species. And for what it's worth, when the Tractor Supply development came in recently, the developer was actually frustrated that there wasn't more specificity in this section. He really wanted to know, what do you want? Just tell me what you want, and I'll provide it, and I'll get out of here. I've got a landscaping budget. How do you want me to use it? So I think that we'll find that it actually, even though it looks really specific, these changes, I think it'll help us in the end by giving people a little better direction. But there's still plenty of wiggle room in here if an individual site isn't appropriate for certain kinds of landscaping. So The lighting section, kind of the same concept. We didn't have enough specificity in here about what the lighting plans should contain and what our thresholds were for lighting. So we have that now, and there's been a lot of feedback that we've gotten in the last year about the Deniker application, and maybe if we had more specifics when they had reviewed the Deniker application, we would have had less obtrusive lights maybe on that lot, but still something that the property owner could use. So it's just us trying to be a little bit responsible here. Moving on to section 780, this is ag and forestry uses. We added a section on farmers markets because we didn't really have much on farmers markets when the actual farmers market needed to relocate to the VFW. So now we have some rules around farmers markets, what constitutes them, what they can sell, the ways in which they're exempt from certain rules because they're an ag purpose. And then Roman numeral 3, we really needed to add our chicken clause here because we have problems with chickens sometimes in the village, and while we want to make sure that they're still allowed, we want to make sure they're in a proper enclosure. So that'll help us with regulation. Section 835, smallest change in here, but maybe the most significant. Our DRB has had a lot of trouble with especially properties along Route 7. Sometimes they want to add an addition, and that addition intrudes on the setback, but doesn't intrude any more than the house already does. Sometimes you have a non-conforming house that's already in the setback, and they just want to make that house a little bit bigger, but no further encroachment. And it didn't look in the regulations like the DRB could approve those kinds of setbacks. So now this allows them to grant setback waivers, even for houses that are unfortunately within a setback. They just can't be any more obtrusive. So that's helpful. And then section 930, this is just getting us in compliance with the state rules for the residential building energy certificate, which we need to require before we issue a certificate of occupancy. And then the last little thing in this packet is the table of uses. So at our planning commission hearing, Bill rightly pointed out that it's great that we added a definition of hotel and motel, but you didn't tell us where we can have them. So we had to update our table of uses accordingly. And now inn and hotel, they've been combined, and that use has been added to the general commercial district as a place that you could have a hotel, because hotels are a little bit larger. And then historic house and inn, we wanted to allow that in the OFA district, just in case there was an old house along Court Street that could be turned into something along the lines of the Swift House. And then motel, the only place that we're proposing to allow those is in the protected highway district, where your 2 motels are now. So that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Jen.
Yep.
Is there anyone with input on the changes, please? Yes, please.
So before Brad speaks, I would like to disclose to the board that I am friends with them, and I have worked for them in the past, but it's been over a year. And he and I communicated prior to this meeting so I could get some clarification. So I don't consider it a conflict of interest, but if someone felt otherwise, I'm just disclosing that prior to.
Okay.
He runs a candy shop. Isn't he everybody's friend?
Yeah. His wife runs the candy shop.
Kathleen, if you want to go to the
Tester.
So does anyone have an issue with me participating in the conversation?
No.
Okay.
Kathleen, if you want to go to exactly, yeah, you'll want to have that up while he's talking.
So I'm here tonight because the zoning that I am in currently, where my business is in East Middlebury's Protected Highway District, the new property we purchased, the motel, is in Protected Highway District. But truck and trailer sharing, truck renting, trailer renting, is not listed under the Protected Highway District as a conditional use. There is part of the Protected Highway District, one of the subsets in the Protected Highway District says I think, truck and trailer sales, and under that, section 6 of the protected highway district, basically, the first hoop, when I was talking to Jen, it's not listed under protected highway district, so it's not a conditional use where I could even get go to the DRB to ask for a permit of the.
Can I show them in the table?
You
Do you mind?
can, yes,
Okay.
I would appreciate that.
Do you mind, so right here, yeah, right here. So, oh, actually, if you go a little further, sorry, Kathleen, can we get the heading in here too? It's this one I'm concerned about that. No, we won't get the heading in there.
I can,
It's equipment and or vehicle rental or sale, and as Brad was saying, it's only allowed in these two districts, which is general commercial and airport. So it's not allowed in the protected highway district.
Correct.
That helps clarify.
So I got a permit 20 years ago, which allowed me to have my self-storage and U-Haul rentals. And what I was coming into the select board for is, I sent all of you a presentation from U-Haul. It's a situation that I want to keep the U-Haul that I have where I am now, but I want to have a small operation at the motel, because a lot of the clientele that rent from me locally are at Sugar Wedge, or places where they don't own vehicles, and there's a bus stop right across the street. So those folks, a lot of times, they need to get a ride down all the way to East Middlebury to rent a truck, and they're transient. They move several times within a 2 or 3 year period, because their situation may change, and they can move from one house where they may be cramped to a better situation. And if they can take the bus to a location, instead of having to get a friend to drive down, or a relative or something like that, I'm not so much wanting to have the U-Hauls there to make a lot of money, but it's a service that's needed in the community. And being closer to town where there's more people, you're gonna get a lot more vehicles off the road. If they can rent a U-Haul for $20 a day, they might not use their friend's pickup and make 7 loads back and forth. It's gonna get vehicles off the roads. And also being on a bus route, it's gonna help some of those people that can't afford to either take a taxi down or something like that. Also, the situation is, I thought it would help my business, Enterprise Car Rental right now, and G-Stone Commercial be conforming. Because right now, if you read it, none of us are conforming. And most of us have been in business a long time to do it.
You know, we do have businesses that are doing that. How does that play out through the DRB?
Yeah, it's always hard to tell if a use is allowed in a district by looking at the neighbors, because there's different weird reasons why people get things. I'm not really sure what the case is at the Walcott Plaza. Could be that it's a PUD because of all the different uses. Could be that it was never permitted. I don't know. Sometimes people are grandfathered in for old uses. Maybe it was a car rental before it became enterprise. So there's different reasons different properties are permitted for various things. But when I look at the motel property, I can't find a way to make that work for Brad, because our zoning prohibits it as a new use to be added in there.
Why does the planning commission not feel that that's an acceptable use that you would add in as with the other changes here?
I don't know how the planning commission would feel about it, because this just came up in my office today.
It was a situation, I think it was almost an oversight, that it wasn't something that, there's a lot of us that do it. So it was a situation that, when I read the Protected Highway District 20 years ago, there's a subsection in it that says equipment sales and service. And if you read it says, see another section. When you go to that section, it says that you can do, it's like saying the first hoop you can't get through because we're not listed, but if you get through that first hoop, the second hoop allows it. So the subsection of
That's
protected
not
highway
that's not
district.
exactly right. We got hung up on that today,
But that was my understanding of it. But
I thought we clarified that today.
but if it had been listed, if I had been listed as a use under protected highway district, then there was some more requirements that would have been required.
Right, but the use is the use according to this table right
Right.
here. And
So
this is yeah.
It's not an allowed use at this point, and
So what does it take for the planning commission to consider that as as a change to the zoning and adding it into your table? What is involved with that
They would
process?
they would have to look it over at their next meeting, and then give you their opinion. See, because we're late in the game now. It's not like this is being brought up at the planning commission hearing where they could just make that change and then pass them forward to you. This is at the very end of the process. So they would have to look it over, and they would have to give you their opinion in their report. And then you would have to hold another public hearing, which is a good idea because I think there's a strong counter argument to be made to having U-Hauls on Route 7 because we get a lot of flack about sprawl and the appearance of sprawl and more vehicles parked along Route 7. So you should definitely be getting all sides of the story, you know. Yeah, you would hold another hearing, and then you would decide at that hearing if you do or don't like what the Planning Commission has recommended to you. But ultimately, this is your hearing. It's at your level now, so.
I'm just looking for the opportunity to present what I'd like to do to the Development Review Board. And at this point, I can't even present my idea because it's not a conditional use.
Yeah, we, as staff, we didn't recommend that Brad go to the DRB because it's such a clear-cut case of it not being in the table of uses. It would have kind of wasted the DRB's time. But we could do that, but I think you'd get the same opinion from them that you're getting from us.
Right, but
Yeah.
that's why I'm here.
Other questions
How
on this?
How long would you consider before you consider revisions to this again? Is this an annual thing, or is it a 5-year thing?
It's up to the planning commission, but you know, there's several planning commissioners who are urging us to do another revision next year. So, yeah, annual makes sense. You know, one of the things that we were thinking of doing on our work plan too is a little bit of Route 7 corridor planning, kind of picking up where Fred left off and thinking about where we have nodes of development, and this would be one node of development, and then trying to clarify like what sort of uses we're looking for in the protected highway district. So there's more work to be done in that area.
Okay. Any other questions on this particular item?
I mean, just sort of related to this is transitional housing in the protected highway district. So I don't know what the conversation was around that. I'm thinking of the Turning Point Center's request to convert one of the motels into transitional housing and how the new zoning regs would affect something like that if they were to approach us again for.
Right, that's another example of a use that was prohibited in a particular district. So, yeah, it was actually the same parcel, right? They wanted to put sober housing in this motel, and that wasn't allowed in that district. And yeah, that's something that we'd like to look at in the next year, but we feel a little nervous about just pulling the trigger in this round of regulations because it requires a little bit closer look. And these regulations were just kind of put together in a really short period of time, in short order, to just fix some clarification issues that we needed to do our jobs.
Okay. Did you have any other thing you wanted to?
No, I wanted an opportunity to at
Yeah.
least present to the DRB, and from their recommendation, it wasn't worth it because it wasn't even listed. And it would, if it was added, it would make the 3 businesses that are doing it now compliant. Because right now we're not. Technically, I mean, I guess we're grandfathered in, at least.
It's
For what
to be
you-
to be able to decide if they're compliant or not, it would require a little bit closer like legal research into exactly like the history of each property and how
Yeah.
different uses came along. I'm not ready to say they're not compliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, point taken, though. So,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Is there any other input? Wow. Oh.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Jennifer, and those that worked on this for the clarification, because I know that that's important. It really will help. And you're so clear in your presentation.
Oh, good.
I really appreciate that. So I know that Victoria gave us some comments about light shielding, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, if you wanted to respond to that. But basically, she was just asking for some clarification of what constitutes commercial, and if that's super clear for people. And I think that that's a good point, and one that we should consider. So, she's saying here, commercial fixtures, what is it? Like, does that include the town lighting, for example, or all outdoor lighting? And I think her aim is that we should encourage as much shielding as possible, which I would support. And do you feel satisfied that the zoning regs are going to cover us?
For municipal streetlights and,
Other outdoor lighting.
well, imagine if we regulated all outdoor lighting, I'd be talking to your neighbor and your neighbor and your neighbor and your neighbor, like that's a little bit of an enforcement nightmare, for residential.
She's asking about the commercial, to define commercial a little bit better.
Okay.
So that was one thing. The transitional housing is the other thing, which I just mentioned. Are we looking at any specificity around solar array setbacks, or?
No, that's how you mail.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is this within Victoria's email too?
Yep, this is Victoria's email.
I don't think solar, did she mention solar arrays?
No.
No.
Okay. So I'm sorry, repeat that question. I apologize deeply.
Well, regarding setbacks.
Uh-huh.
like, Is there regulation regarding solar array setbacks in the zoning regs?
Nifty quiz question. Oh no, I'm sweating like I do on the phone all day long when people call me. I think I know how to answer that. See, there's different kinds of solar arrays. Some are,
I'm just-
yeah.
I just know that, again, it's sort of like the other things, it's an opportunity to provide clarity so that when we're approached by commercial developers for solar arrays, we have a good answer for what's acceptable around setbacks and screening.
Well, a solar array is a structure just like any other structure, and I can
So
tell you
that's-
those
that could
setbacks
be
like
the
that. There's a possibility that some types of solar might be allowed to encroach into the setbacks, in which case it should be in our section in here that talks about exemptions.
Okay. And the other thing I know we've talked about is Exchange Street and mixed use on Exchange Street, and maybe that's a different conversation that happens later.
Yeah, that's another community conversation.
Okay.
We have a list of community conversations. One is Exchange Street, another is Route 7. And by which we mean inviting like all different stakeholders to come and sit at the table and tell us like what they're thinking, and hopefully you guys would be part of that effort too. And then another one is social service facilities, because people love to say there's not enough blah 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 housing, and I don't really know what does transitional housing mean, and is that exactly the kind of housing you're looking for? There's got to be about half a dozen different kinds of housing that different nonprofits are interested in. So we need to parse those out, get them defined, and then figure out where we want to put them.
Okay, anyway, those are some of the things that I've been thinking about that are on my mind.
Those are all good thoughts.
And back to chickens, so it's good that you require that they need to be fenced. Do we need to provide any guidelines or regulations regarding the number, or is that open-ended? Okay, anyway,
Oh. If they're all in the enclosure,
I guess if they're enclosed and they're not bothering anybody.
right? But 1,000 chickens on Seymour Street would be really bad,
Okay.
Especially if they're all roosters.
right? Maybe we should think about that.
Members, and another issue to address is parking, like the amount of parking spots per, I guess, development, in terms of looking at the future. So I would just like to put that on our radar for a future conversation
Mhm.
too.
Especially in downtown, we need to think
Especially
about
downtown.
recalibrating that. Thanks, Laura.
Okay.
From the audience, was there any other input? Okay, I think before we deliberate at the select board level, I would seek a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Farhad can have it.
Okay? Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Pleasure of the board. How would we like to proceed on these changes? Are there any material changes that you would like to see added now, or are we comfortable giving a list of things we would like to see come back before us with a target date of within the next 12 months?
I think that's the case, yeah. I'm comfortable with what it is. I think you've done a fantastic job. It's clarified a lot. It's a lot to take on, and having served on code writing committees, you don't get it all, but you just try to get the majority, and I think you've done a great job. So I would be pleased to proceed with adopting it.
Rest of the board?
Support that.
If there's
I would
general-
Second it.
Can we, I think that granting Brad's request is not as significant as it may sound, because it still has to go before DRB review. So, I know the planning commission put a lot of time in its last ditch, but he just found out about this today. And I guess if we do go forward, would definitely like to see, something from the planning commission within a year on changes to that. Given that we already have several businesses operating in that capacity on these locations, within this district now, so.
Well, I think we could add to the motion to have a one-year review to deal with those issues.
And I think what Laura was talking about too, the things that she was talking about too, sort of having a timeline, hopefully in a year, of when those things would be addressed would be really nice to know. It's a lot of things that we want to talk about, but to really, in a year from now, have a better idea of when we would be talking about those specific items would be great.
So are we asking for other things than just that, like Laura's suggestion about clarification on commercial lighting or Victoria's suggestion of clarification on commercial lighting and maybe more clarification on transient housing, maybe the rental in protective highway district, as all things that we would like to see reviewed for the next time in 12 months?
Well, I think what we can do in that case is if we set a review of this tentatively March 1, 2019, and any of these issues that come up get submitted in formally as a written submittal for them to consider. I think what Brad brought up, and I'm sure there'll be other things, Victoria's, they're all, and Laura's, they're all valid points. But at this point, I think it's safe to say we've got a pretty good document for the most part, put it out there, and then adjust as necessary with, say, a March 1, 2019 review point.
Yeah, it's a living document. We're always making
Yes.
changes. So it should be comforting to know that those things are on our work list and are being taken seriously.
I think you hit exactly the right word. It's a living document, and we learn things, yeah.
I'd like to see you focus, we've given you a laundry list. I don't think you can solve it all in a year. I'd like to see you focus on that Route 7 corridor and have a plan for that, because that came up, this is not the first time with Brad's request that that's come up. There was a lot of people that approached me based upon the Tractor Supply development, in that this had been talked about for years, that we needed to plan for that, what we wanted in that corridor, and we've done none of it. And so I think personally that would be my priority. I think we need to give you a priority. 'Cause to give you a garbage can full, I think it's more than you can undertake if you're gonna actually plan that, be working on that plan. You're talking,
It just so happens that we totally agree in terms of priorities, so that's totally cool. Otherwise, I would say maybe we should give you a list of all the things, and then you should select that priority. But yeah, with the Tractor Supply, that's really brought that to the forefront of what's on our mind. There's more development potential in Foot Street, for instance, and Act 250 is requiring Tractor Supply to put in a turn lane. like $200,000 improvement. That came as a big surprise to everyone. And maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe we could have done a transportation plan that sort of had some, that sort of looked at that intersection. We should be looking at the Boardman Street intersection and thinking about what we want those nodes of development to look like on Route 7. And if we can develop those nodes, maybe we have less of an appearance of sprawl all the way through. And that way everybody can get what they want, People who have properties on Route 7 can still have development potential, and then people who don't like the look of, a continuous, unbroken development, will have breaks between those nodes. It's kind of what we're thinking right now, but.
I would rather than inject something, and I apologize, Brad, I know it's late for you, but I think we need to look at it in the total, what we really want for that corridor, and I'd rather have you come back with the full plan.
That sounds very wise.
So if everybody's okay with that, then I would entertain a motion.
Well, I guess I'd make a motion to adopt the amended zoning and subdivision regulations with an annual review due March 1st, 2019. And I think to assist Jennifer and her group to have written requests submitted by January 1st, 2019, so there's time for them to not have a last minute.
So by January, you want them to have another round of zoning edits done?
No. To adopt it as is, the way it is, but then have a review of the document with any recommended changes by March 1st, 2019.
Sure, we always welcome an opportunity to come talk to you guys about what we're working on, so that'd be fine.
I think your suggestion for the January 1st deadline was if someone wanted to suggest changes.
That's right, any written
Oh, that makes sense.
suggestions
Okay.
by
So if
January
somebody-
1st, 2019,
Yes,
that's correct.
if somebody would like to see suggested changes, that they submit it to you in writing by January 1st, so you have time to review their suggestion prior to the March 1st deadline.
Okay, that's good. Otherwise, we'd be getting our hustle on before.
No, that's exactly, I want to give you fair time for it.
Okay,
So
thank
it's
you.
not a last minute situation.
So can we just restate the motion?
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure, I can do that again. Make a motion to adopt the amended zoning and subdivision regulations with a review period, a one-year review, but due by March 1st, 2019, and all written suggestions, requests, comments to Planning and Zoning Director by January 1, 2019.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Depends how friendly it is.
Well, you know me.
Let me get a
Only
second.
friendly.
No, it's very friendly.
Please, hold on. Can we
Okay.
get a second, and then let
Okay.
me do a friendly
I'll
amendment?
second it.
Seconded.
That
So-
any new changes,
Correct.
I just want to make that clear.
That's
Like if
correct.
someone had new regulations they
Correct.
wanted to see.
Correct.
By
That's-
January
That's
1st.
that's friendly implied.
Yes,
Yes, I agree with you.
Thank you.
And you're talking about an informal process that happens outside of like these hearings and
Yes.
things? Okay.
And I can support that as well.
Do you support the friendly amendment? Okay.
It's
Comments on the
part of the
motion?
role.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Okay. We had a really raucous crowd here from the Planning Commission. We appreciate you all the hard work you've been doing.
Raucous?
Yeah,
Really.
it was like crickets. But they were raucous until we called the meeting to order.
I do want to come and talk to you about.
I'd love to have you stay just through the citizen comments, because we have a presentation.
Sounds good.
So, next on the agenda is approval of the minutes.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
One second.
So we've got a motion to approve February 13 regular select board minutes, and seconded. All in favor, or are there any changes, rather, recommended changes?
I didn't have any.
Nope.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Clean
right.
slate.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Citizen comments.
Can I go here also? I think it'll be easier to get up than from there. I have a bad knee. I just want to announce my candidacy for those who haven't already figured out that I'm running for select board. There've been some letters in the paper and some advertisements. I plan to do the very best I can for all the people of Middlebury and East Middlebury. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Are there any other, Ross?
Hi, I just want to make the Select Board aware that, I guess it was a week or two ago, Vermont Law School sent a delegation to review net metering for interested folks in the town. And what they presented basically was 3 options, and brought to light that perhaps we need to think about what our priorities are. So the greatest cost savings over the lifetime of a net metered project for the town would be if we hired a contractor, identified sites in town, had them do the permitting and build it, and we own it, and we could retire the renewable energy credits. That would give us the greatest savings in the long run, and it would reduce our carbon footprint. It would significantly have some upfront costs, though, which means taxes and borrowing, most likely. Another option would be to enter into a third-party net metering agreement with a developer that's already doing a project and is looking for an off-taker. This option would have minimal upfront costs because other than staff and legal time to issue an RFP and look over the contract, basically. It would shift all permitting and siting work onto the developer. The cost savings over the lifetime of the contract would be less than those available if we built our own, but much less upfront costs. And the renewable energy credits would probably not be available. So we would save money, but we wouldn't do a lot to reduce our carbon footprint. And then the third option is to do nothing and keep buying our electricity from Green Mountain Power, which is the most expensive option over the long run, because we don't reduce our costs of electricity at all. So it seems like we need to figure out what, in terms of priorities are, do we want to save money, reduce taxes in the long term through short-term increase in taxes and investment and a reduction in our carbon footprint, or save a more modest amount of money sooner and reduce taxes with a little short-term investment, but with little or no carbon reductions. And so hopefully the board might provide some guidance as to how, as a town, we would figure out what we want to do here.
So, Ross, after the elections and we have a new select board, we will have an offsite where we'll be doing our strategic planning, and you did a very nice recap for the select board, and that'll go into that packet to talk about where that lines up in our strategic plan and where we see that going as far as the work. And I would imagine that would go back to the Energy Committee for review if we decide we want to pursue looking at having our own field. Then we would have to refer that back for study and recommendations. So I would ask you to be patient with us as we look at that, where that lines up.
Okay.
Probably
Yeah,
be in the next, I think April 12th is our offsite planning.
Yeah, we haven't updated our energy plan itself, so unfortunately, we don't have a lot of guidance there either. So that's
Yeah.
another area that hopefully we could be looking at some
Something we
point.
can work on collaboratively.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ross. Is there anybody else with something? So I'd like to, before we go into the rest of the agenda, I would like to draw some attention to my cohort to the right. You can see she has nice flowers. So for all those viewers out there, her husband has got some great bonus points. And this is Susan's last select board meeting. And the Select Board has a resolution recognizing Susan. So the Town of Middlebury, resolution recognizing the service of Susan Shashak, whereas we, the Select Board of the Town of Middlebury, take this opportunity to recognize the service of Susan Shashak, who has served the Town of Middlebury with distinction as a member of the Select Board since her appointment in 2011. And whereas during her tenure on the Select Board and as Vice Chair of the Select Board and Chair of the Infrastructure Committee, Susan brought an insightful, thoughtful, and valued focus on process and accountability. And whereas as a board member and an East Middlebury resident, Susan has championed the Middlebury River Flood Resiliency Project to protect the East Middlebury community from future damaging floods. And whereas Susan has played a role in several major projects within the town, such as the construction of the new town offices and recreation center, and the upcoming replacement of the railroad bridges on Main Street and Merchants Row. And whereas Susan has served on the Middlebury Community Television Board since 2013, and whereas Susan has maintained an attitude of professionalism and courtesy and genuine caring for the concern of citizens in the town, therefore be it resolved that the Town of Middlebury celebrates the commitment and hard work of Susan Shashak and thanks her for her extraordinary dedication and outstanding service to the Middlebury community. Signed, the Middlebury Select Board.
Crying again.
Would you like to say anything?
I would. I had something written for the end, so I wasn't expecting this now. Thank you. Victor remembered that he asked me, it's funny, you had talked to me about being on the Select Board, and Fred Dunnington actually talked to me about it too. And I remember going in front of everyone, and I did not expect to get voted on. And I was, and I am really glad that I did. And Kathleen came back, but we started the same week, and I just really have learned so much and worked with people, and I'm glad Turks are here, and Ross is here, and Vic is here, and a lot of people that just mean a lot to me. And it really has been my favorite year to serve, and I thank you for it. Thank you.
So thank you for everything you've done. You are a very diligent member of the committee and put a lot out there, and I know you want to devote some time to your own family and business, but thank you for all the service. So next on the agenda is Chris.
It's always good to be on the agenda while the board's still in a good mood.
Do you want a flower?
That'd be pretty. Black Eyed Susan signed this. Evening, all.
Evening.
So, Personnel Policy Part 2. As you recall, we spoke last 2 weeks ago when I presented to the board the Policy Review Committee's recommendations for amendments to the town personnel policy as a result of the committee's 6-month review. I left that meeting with requests from the board for minor clarifying revisions to 2 policy provisions. The first, to make an affirmative statement in Section 21 that regarding the eligibility of regular part-time employees for bereavement leave. And the second, to restore in Section 18, specifically paragraph 1805, statutory language regarding an employee's right to request unpaid leave to attend his or her own town meeting with appropriate supervisory notification. The Policy Review Committee met last week, and I'm back here tonight on the committee's behalf once again to review with you the recommended revised language for those two provisions, and to request that the board once again consider adopting the amended personnel policy. The updated provisions are included in both the clean and marked up copies of the full personnel policy that are in your packet, but for ease of reference, I also copied them into the agenda notes for tonight, just to make things easier. And since they're very brief, I'll take a moment to read them into the record. Regarding bereavement leave in section 21, paragraph 21.01, the committee proposes the following revised language. Full-time and part-time employees may be excused for up to 5 days with pay for bereavement leave for the death of a close relative or extended family member. For part-time employees, bereavement leave pay only applies when leave is requested for a day that the employee has actually been scheduled to work. Regarding Section 18, holiday leave and personal days, paragraph 1805, we simply restored the existing statutory language that was included in the VLCT's model policy, and that simply says that to request to take unpaid leave for employment, for the purpose of attending town meeting must be made at least 7 business days prior to the date of the town meeting to the employee's supervisor, and such leave shall be granted provided that it does not cause an interruption to essential operations of the town. So those are the two provisions. The board had also asked that we take a moment to do an analysis of the estimated budget impact of extending the holiday pay benefit to part-time employees, regular part-time employees. That analysis is also in your packet and up on the screen. Thank you to Jackie Sullivan for pulling this information together for me. As you can see, there are 3 regular part-time employees on payroll today that would be impacted by this. And we've played out the actual holiday by holiday impact for each one of those. And as you can see, the bottom line total is just over $2,000, a fairly de minimis impact on the basis of a $3.3 million payroll budget, about 7/100%. We did note that, and I think Ann had mentioned this last time, and I had failed to mention that there are two regular part-time employees today who have previous agreements with their supervisors, under which they essentially already receive holiday pay. And these are very long-standing agreements that the committee didn't feel appropriate to undo. And so it was our recommendation that those two situations be grandfathered in. So we created a footnote for paragraph 1801 that simply says, previously agreed upon supervisory practices regarding holiday pay for staff hired prior to February 27, 2017, which is when you adopted the policy last year, will be grandfathered under this provision so that no one is disadvantaged.
Mm-hmm. So the only difference in that was that they were getting it even if they weren't scheduled to work, or what's different from what the proposed policy is?
The two situations, and Ann may have to clarify what the situation in her office, but in the other employee's situation, she's receiving holiday pay. She's being given another day off when a holiday happens to occur on a day that she normally has off.
But going forward, it would be just if the holiday fell when they were scheduled.
Correct. And the spreadsheet shows you what the impact would be.
And so we only have the 3 part-time employees.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any plans to hire big groups of part-time employees, right?
You'd have to talk to Kathleen about that. To my knowledge, no.
Questions of the board?
And how do these affect the union employees? Does this apply to union employees or not to?
The contract, as it happens, and I neglected to mention this last time, the contract already provides that benefit to full-time and part-time employees. So we're simply catching up in that regard to what the contract already stipulates.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris. That totally covers what I remembered that we agreed to in the last meeting, and you were very clear. I did have a consideration
Mhm.
since then about an employee exit policy, and if we needed to add some language. Maybe it doesn't have to be in this round, but why not? You know, like, we could approve this with the provision like we just did with zoning regs, where this is reviewed in a year and we add this additional employee exit policy. We have a termination policy, and some of it's kind of covered there, but that doesn't really cover
Mhm.
situations which we've had where we have employees that leave, and then what is the policy? And it might be handy to have that really clear.
Can you say a little bit more about what would be included in that?
So like upon, you know, what's the procedure upon leaving?
Mhm.
You know, is that outlined, you know, like what happens? And
Okay.
like keys and notifications and technology, you know, like, so
Mhm.
you could definitely borrow that from other HR, I just found one quickly that gave me a quick idea, you know, like, that I can share with you, but you might find that yourself.
Sure.
And that could just be an additional, like, section 36 or section 35 that gets added, so that would be an employee exit policy,
Mhm.
added to our personnel policy to just make it clear.
Sure. Point well taken. In fact, the committee has contemplated going a little bit beyond that even and creating an employee handbook, which would include an onboarding process and an exit process,
That would be great.
which would be probably an attachment to the personnel policy, but so therefore it could be updated separately from the policy itself. Be more procedural in nature, but we've been talking about that.
So what would you like with this one? Do you want to consider adding this to this particular policy, or wait to add it later?
It's going to take some time. There's a lot of work we need to do in that area in general, and I think this could be adopted, if the board is amenable to it, could be adopted tonight as is, with further instruction to the policy review committee, if that's the appropriate panel to do it, to work on developing an employee handbook.
So that's all I had.
Okay.
So you're recommending that we approve it, but that we suggest or recommend that.
Pending the addition of exit policy.
Well,
Within a year, maybe, or?
I would,
Pending, but recommending that, or instructing them to develop a policy and come. I would assume that you have an informal policy now that you, or don't you?
Policy would be a stretch.
Practice.
We have practices, yes.
Well, I mean, I just assume that that's a place to start,
Mhm.
but that's really your expertise.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to put together a recommendation. Yeah.
I think that's a very good recommendation.
Yes.
I would support that.
Okay.
pleasure of the board.
I'll move that we adopt the amended town personnel policy. And I'm not really sure how to word the rest.
Direct them to develop an exit policy
In a year.
within, by March 1st, 2019,
Mhm.
for board consideration.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay.
Sound workable, Chris?
Yes,
Excellent work, though. Thanks. Really good.
thank you.
Okay. Any
Did-
comments on the recommendation, on the motion?
Were there any other questions, though? I just didn't want to make sure. I wasn't sure if any of the other staff was here for this.
I don't think so.
Oh, I don't think so either, but I don't know.
So, if there's no other comments on the motion, all in favor of the motion to adopt the amended town personnel policy and direct the personnel committee to come up with a onboarding and exit procedure, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Chris. And let's create some parking spaces for you.
First, I would also like to thank Susan Shashok for her service and serving on the board. And as a select board member, I think people should know that automatically makes you a member of the Board of Civil Authority. And it has been a pleasure working with you through tax abatement hearings, elections, and whatnot. And you've always stepped up to take a great leadership role, and I appreciate it. Thanks. And so, simple request for parking spaces. Town meeting is coming up Monday night and Tuesday Australian ballot. So I'm just requesting now that the board allocate the 10 spaces that we've allocated in the past for elections for election parking only on Tuesday, March 6th. And they're the spaces directly behind the office here and those across the road from them. It's 5 spaces and 5 spaces.
What did we put for a time limit on that? Was that 30 minutes?
Usually
or-
just the election time is just fine, like from 7 in the morning when the polls open till they close in the evening at 7 p.m.
But we're putting a time limit on those 10 spaces, right?
Oh, a time limit?
Right.
No, we haven't put a time limit when you're parking, but we put up signs saying election parking only. And typically they've turned over
Okay.
well throughout the day.
Just by doing that.
Yes, yeah, but we haven't set, I mean, and we wouldn't be really monitoring that anyway in terms of,
Yeah.
you know, if it's 10 minutes or
Yeah.
20, but, yeah.
Okay.
In your packet
I'll
is the
make that motion.
proposed
Make the motion?
Sorry, I was talking when Kathleen was talking. I didn't hear what you said, Kathleen.
There's a proposed motion in your packet, and on the screen.
Okay. I can't read it. Hang on.
Do you want me to move it?
I like I have to confess.
Just one quick question. We've, this is the second year we've done this? And third?
It could be third,
And I'm
second.
wondering if we shouldn't just look at, maybe not immediately, but for the future, just have it as a general request for every election day, because we don't need to go through, it's a critical function. And so just to have it as election days from the time the polls are open to the time the polls close.
That those particular
That those particular
spaces.
spaces will
can
be
be
marked,
marked.
and just do it as a
I
blanket.
don't know anything about the laws around that, so I'm quite
Well, no,
amenable to that
that's why-
myself.
That's
but-
why I would be
yeah.
reluctant to add it for this immediate point, but it's something that we should just look at and just be done with this once and
Mhm.
for all.
Well, Chief Hanley is here. Would it be okay?
Do
Yeah,
you
I mean,
know?
the board can order these things at your pleasure. I could even make a temporary parking order myself. To actually enforce the thing, it's better if it goes through the board, but I believe the ordinance has a provision where any emergency order can be put out temporarily for this, and this is.
Can they just do this as an ongoing, for every election that we hold here, those spaces automatically reserved?
Sure,
Okay.
yeah, you control
Okay.
parking.
Well, if that's the case, then I say let's just do it now.
Let's do it now.
Or you can designate that the town managers, we're not getting caught up on what is the date or when it happens. When
Right.
the building is gonna be used for elections, then the manager can
Authorize.
order this to be a temporary parking thing.
Yes.
So how about us?
Authorize the town manager.
Makes sense.
Excellent.
So make the motion to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to reserve and go through all the different things, reserve the 5 30-minute parking spaces and the 5 spaces directly behind them in the parking lot behind the town offices for any town meeting, Australian ballot, or other voting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Does that sound good?
Second?
All right.
All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Good.
All right.
Liquor license.
Liquor licenses. So you should have in your packet a list of all of the liquor applications along with outside consumption and entertainment permits that I've received thus far. So there's only a few that are not included in this at this point, and that will come back to you. So I guess I'm just asking for you to approve those and approve for me to sign on your behalf. Oh, and I should mention, I'm asking pending the inspections by the police and fire chiefs, because we will be receiving those, which we have not received yet.
Questions of Ann? Okay.
I'm happy
You want
to-
to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to provisionally approve applications for 2018 first and second class liquor licenses, outside consumption and entertainment permits as presented by Town Clerk Ann Webster, pending the receipt of approval recommendations from the required public safety inspections.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
And I'll move to approve Middlebury College's request for a blanket approval to serve liquor at catered events on the college campus from May 1st, 2018 to April 30th, 2019.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
That's conditional.
Then I think I was spacing out a little bit. Did your proposal, or did your motion include signing on your behalf?
No, we just approved the college's request.
Okay, I mean the liquor license part, not the blanket approval. but-
As presented, we approved as presented. So no, it didn't.
I would like that as well.
As presented,
as
and you
presented.
said to sign on our behalf, so he is correct.
Okay,
Thank you,
as
John.
long as that's clear.
I'm like, no, as presented, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we
Thank you,
good?
Ann.
All right.
Chief?
Well, with the advent of natural gas, especially a pipe running right in front of the police station, we've gone and looked at what it would cost or if there would be any savings for transitioning our building from propane, which we currently get, to natural gas. The building, when it was built, all the HVAC equipment was set up for natural gas. In fact, we had to pay to put conversion up there for propane. So now, if this is approved, we would just reverse the process. We've had people from Vermont Gas looking at it. The piping is all intact. Everything is what they need. It's just a matter of taking the parts off of the equipment and going back to all natural as how they were delivered. They ran a cost estimate for us. It looked like, and I ran some of these numbers for you on the message I sent to Kathleen. The cost for conversion is about $2,100. That's for VHV to do it. There is no cost for hooking the natural gas up to the building. And the savings first year based on the price per gallon at the last price that we bought propane for would be roughly about $3,700 a year. There's variables in this, weather, how much we use. I mean, this goes on, but just using a baseline figure, comparing apples to apples, what we paid for propane and what natural gas currently costs at the same usage, and it would save us in the first year about $3,700. And it would then, that savings then, once we got past the cost of actually doing a conversion, we'd see more substantial savings after that. That being said, we're going to retain propane to run our generator. The natural gas doesn't have the pressure to kick the generator over, so we've got to use propane for that. Other than that, we'd have to put in some expensive equipment to run that. I like being an emergency service, having two sources of fuel anyway to run our building. We're going to retain the parts they take off the equipment on the roof. If we have to, in an emergency, switch back to propane, which we already have storage for, it would be a very simple reconversion back to propane in case we lost a source of natural gas. Looking at natural gas is a little bit better BTUs on a cubic centimeter of gas as opposed to propane. There's some advantages to going to natural gas over propane. We'd have a consistent source of propane. Right now, it's been a constant struggle for deliveries. As you know, every budget year, sometimes we spend a ton of money on propane, and some years we don't spend hardly any at all. That's not have anything to do with how much we use. It's a delivery schedule. If I get a delivery in the end of the budget year and another delivery at the beginning of another budget year, we've got two deliveries close together. We may not get a delivery for another 8 or 9 months, so it would show that we didn't use much propane, but we are using it. It's just the delivery in the building is different. I'd rather go to a monthly billing anyway and have a consistent supply of fuel.
Questions of Chief?
One of the items here, and thanks for addressing this, there's, the next item is related to an energy audit.
Yes.
of the building. When I had my home converted to gas, Vermont Gas actually performed an energy audit. Do they do something similar for commercial?
Yeah, in fact, I asked them about it when we met with them a while back, and they actually put us in a queue to have one done. But he said usually on building this new, they don't do a full energy audit because the building is brand new. But they would do it once we got converted or changed over. I believe they would have the person do it. He gave me the name of the person that does these, and he was going to try to schedule it. When that will happen, I don't know.
Yeah, because it was actually very thorough, and in fact, I was amazed at the stuff they found.
Well, one of the issues we'd have to do is scheduling, because parts of the building have to be closed down. It's noisy, they essentially fill the building with air.
That's right.
And, but we have to keep operating through that, so we'd have to find a way that we could coordinate that with as little disruption to the operation as possible.
And how would that vary from this energy audit that may come up, that's coming up for the next item? They're essentially the same, right?
No.
Or no? No?
That I can't answer.
Okay.
I've talked to Ross a little bit about it. One is done by the company that's selling us the natural gas, and one is a more independent energy audit. And I don't know the difference in what they do.
Okay, all right.
So let's address the natural gas conversion. Are there any other questions on that?
Well, I was going to mention the same thing, and I know that the Energy Committee has, been planning an audit of,
Can we deal with one thing first?
well, it's related, because
Okay.
you don't want to, I don't know if you have to resize equipment after you do whatever you plan to do to the building. That's one thing. And I do appreciate you looking at the savings, and you're looking at consistent supply source, which.
Yeah, and billing,
Important.
consistent billing as well.
So I understand that. I think if we are going to go that way, that we should consider asking if they would waive the conversion cost in light of doing business with us, with the easements that we just went through in that discussion. Just ask the question.
Well, the conversion cost is not by natural gas, it's by a third-party vendor. It's by our maintenance people. It's a different company. It's Vermont Heating and Ventilating that would do the conversion. It wouldn't be Vermont Natural Gas.
Right. There's some equipment conversions and modifications, and that's what they would be charging for. So it's mechanical things, electrical things.
So, Chief, I know you've talked about maybe in infrastructure a little bit about the life expectancy of the equipment you have now and it being sort of at the end of that. How do you think that plays in all this? Like, do you think it's worth it at this point to convert given the life of the units we have, or do we wait and consider upgrading?
I think even an upgrade, if you went with natural gas equipment, it wouldn't affect it. The beauty of this is your saving is substantial in the first year. As long as we do it in the same budget year so that we're not getting, filling our tanks with propane and then switching in the same budget year to natural gas, we wouldn't save any money until the second or third year. In this, if we do it all in the same budget year, we're saving a couple of $1,000s right off the bat. The equipment is in fairly good shape. It's been maintained well. It's got a 15 years the life of the equipment. It'll go beyond that. We've had the techs look at it. We should get 20 to 25 years out of it before we start replacing major components. We've been replacing some minor components along the way in the last couple of years.
What is I thought we were already beyond the 15.
Well, it was turned on in the winter of 2003.
Oh.
So it's
we're
been running every winter since 2003. So we're about there.
We're right about 15.
Yes.
So we're right about at the life, so just want to think about.
Yeah, I mean, if you switch to an entire different heating system, you're looking at a fairly significant capital cost, $150,000 that was the biggest cost in that building was the HVAC system.
Right. No, only thing I'm considering is just the life expectancy of the unit and, does it make sense at this point in the life expectancy of what's there to make the conversion or not?
I think it is, and as far as there's 7 individual components to this system. We wouldn't replace all 7 at once. That's why we put that little bit of money away every year. We can actually rebuild these things and get more of a life out of them. They're well maintained, so they're probably not running as efficiently as they were when they were put in. But we've replaced a number of pumps and pulleys and some other components to these systems as we go. So I think while they tell you the lifespan of this equipment is 15 years, I think we can realistically expect 20 to 25 before we do a really significant change to any of the units on the roof.
thinking again, if we were to go to a net zero police station, if that's our goal, you know, like to try to move as we do renovation of buildings, I don't know how this factors in as a consideration. I see the savings you're talking about right now, but I'm thinking about the consideration we're in about going even further with the building to get off of fossils even further. You know, and then, so what are we looking at there for heating systems? If it's a heat pump technology that's gonna go in there, does it make sense to make this conversion if we may be considering that?
Well, I think it does at this point, because if you look at our whole building inventory, this is actually one of the better ones as far as the way it's insulated and built. So we have others that are a bigger issue, that are using a lot more fuel than these are. I think based on the heat pump technology, that's likely involves a lot more work, as Chief mentioned, a lot more expense. This makes sense right now as a next step, and then review the issues of all of the buildings as to what they're going to need. But I think this makes good value, both in terms of energy consumption and the cost of operating it.
I think you're saving money from day one with this. So it's not like we're putting out a capital expense or we're going to have a 5 or 10 year payback.
Right.
From the time that we plug the natural gas in, you're starting to save money. And that's money that you could probably put away into more capital improvements if you want, or at least plan for a conversion down the road when these units, and eventually they'll have to all be replaced. Eventually we won't be able to get parts for them. So eventually they're going to have to be replaced. But right now, from day one, the minute we turn it on, we're going to be saving money over what we're spending right now.
I mean, we're using fossil fuel in the immediate, one way or another.
Can we, I mean, I'd like to, it seems like we're gonna save money the first year. It just seems like the smart thing to do. I've got an agenda I'd like to keep to, unless you really have something you need to input into this. I'd kind of like to get a motion to move this, and I think Chief's done some good research. There's some great points here, and I think we need to continue to move that way. But frankly, it's not in the budget for the next year, and if we can save money in the next year, it seems to me like we should move and support Chief in his efforts to try to be efficient.
I move that the board authorize Chief Hanley to proceed with plans to convert the Middlebury Police Station facility from propane to natural gas.
I'll second.
I see that this is if there's a second.
Yes, we have a second.
There is a second.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me this is a minor shift. I think we're all in the same camp that we hope someday we can move towards maintaining our buildings without using fossil fuels. But I don't see that doing this in any way inhibits that goal. It seems to me, to a certain extent, it at least allows us to save some money, and I think that's sensible. It's a minor change.
I do see Laura's point that, you know, if there's gonna be an energy audit at the police department, that there might be some, you know, you're that close. I can see the point that there might be some things that you learn in there that are valuable and might affect the conversion, either make it better, I don't know. So it does seem kind of strange to approve that and then be this close to getting the energy audit too. So I see your point, but it's.
The one thing, we're approving this for next year, right? You're doing it.
Yes.
And there's nothing that precludes us from getting the energy audit done, and if that informs us, but I don't see how that changes. You're really just changing the gas that you're firing. The energy audit's gonna maybe show insulation or other things that we can do to be more efficient. You use less gas. I don't see how that audit will change the way that we actually, you know, we're not gonna change all the units on the roof.
Right.
In the next year, and if we can save money in 12 months, that it was a no-brainer.
Right.
And I think long-term, we'd need to be working towards net zero facilities, but and that's our goal. We've said that, we've now created the first in the state, but it's just not, it's not in the cards for us to be able to afford that all immediately.
Yep.
So, okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments on the motion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, so we have 6-4 and 1 abstention. Thanks, Chief. Now we want to go into, and is Ross going to present? Okay, Ross, on the Energy Committee's request for sole source procurement of the audit service of the police department and for an energy audit on police department and teen center.
Right, we originally were also looking at the Public Works, but I guess there's some question as to how long that building is gonna be in use. The police department quote we got was for $8,100 and $1,400 for the teen center, but we could get it for $8,600 if we do both concurrently. The difference here is, yes, we would be paying for an audit as opposed to waiting for the gas to get hooked up and then getting a free audit through Vermont Gas. But as the chief mentioned, Vermont Gas's audit would not be a thorough audit, a complete audit. And my understanding is that Efficiency Vermont, their assistant programs that they have to help put in efficiency measures, they only qualify to people who get complete audits. So it may be worth spending the money to get the complete audit. Plus, we're getting from Zero by Degrees, which they're not looking to sell us anything, so we can get a good objective audit from them. They're not going to be doing it thinking they're going to get more work out of it and selling us other stuff.
So Ross, this is a redirect of, we talked about this previously, like you said, on the Public Works, and this is a redirect based upon the study that the Public Works facility is not a long-term facility.
Well, that and the fact that we only have $10,000. For the Public Works, I think it was around $7,900 was the quote for that one.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to figure out what could we do with the money we have, and so this is what we ended up with.
Okay. Questions of Ross?
Can I,
Yes.
before questions, can I make a
Absolutely.
couple of points?
Yeah.
First, part of this proposal is assessing the efficiency of the heating and AC systems in the building, and pending the results of those analysis, it could be very beneficial to us cost-wise, depending on the efficiency of them, to replace them sooner or later. And that is the kind of thing that this audit will tell us, although I don't think it necessarily makes a difference whether we convert to natural gas or propane. But this audit will tell us that. It will give us payback information based on the efficiency of the existing equipment on, whether we should do some of this work sooner rather than later.
Right.
The other thing I would like to point out is I did have concerns that it is a 24/7 building, it is a police station. How does it work with scheduling and what they need to do? This company has performed audits on other police department buildings in other parts of the state. He is familiar with working with them to meet their needs and also his needs, and he will sit down with Chief Hanley and work out a schedule for what needs to happen for his operations and for the audit, so that everybody is happy. And he has done that previously on other police department buildings, so he has experience with that. So, I did have that conversation with him about that.
Okay.
I did also in the email, I was included in the packet, after the second proposal, I had some additional questions that he being John Hanel of Zero by Degrees, responded to, and that was whether it was worthwhile to spend the remaining $1,400 of the 10 and doing something on the Public Works building, whether there was anything that he could do to give us some idea of short-term payback on that building, that, you know, maybe we could save some money doing something. But his recommendation was, based on his experience working with Efficiency Vermont, that they don't accept anything less than a full audit. And so even if he did find something, we may not have incentives. So based on that information, the Energy Committee agreed that maybe that $1,400 would be better spent in investing in the buildings that we do the audits on, rather than spending it on Public Works. But that's certainly for the board to decide otherwise, but.
And on a
And-
full audit, they're doing lights, heat,
Yes,
AC.
so there is a data collection list here in his proposal for the building. It includes an infrared scan, blower door test, an inventory of present lighting and appliances, efficiency of heating and AC systems, efficiency of water heating system, analysis of present fuel and kilowatt consumption, measurements of the building, an energy model for the building, and reconciling with an actual consumption based on predicted energy savings. It's a pretty involved and thorough audit. So I think I don't think it's the same as what Forgot Gas would come in and do for free.
So you're both recommending we go with this recommendation?
It's what the Energy Committee.
That seemed to be the best option.
What is the
Okay.
performance period on this?
Performance period?
When would they do the
When
audit?
do the work?
He is available the first part of March if the select board would approve it.
With, 120 days, or?
We did
Yeah.
not discuss that.
I imagine they would be connecting with the chief and the people who run the buildings and scheduling that and what works for them. That's one of the criteria. The first thing is a kickoff meeting, data collection visits, and discuss the general building use and overall goals. And so I imagine that would come up there if we have a timeline that we want to get it done in within a certain period of time.
Pleasure of the board.
I'll make the motion to award the contract to Zero by Degree LLC for concurrent energy audits to be conducted at the Police Department and Teen Center for a total cost of $8,600.
Second.
Questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Super. Tax stabilization task force recommendation.
So the task force met on the 14th of February to review the second proposal. Jordan joined, I'm saying that right? Jordan, sorry. Jordan joined that discussion. The recommendation is in the packet. Do you need me to review it, or is everybody comfortable with?
Are there any
That's it.
questions on?
No.
So the recommendation was to deny the tax stabilization.
There was also a recommendation, the couple of members of the task force felt that the applicant should have sufficient time at a regular scheduled select board meeting to make their case to the select board regardless of the task force recommendation. So that was also included, so. So, do you want me to
Take
comment
that.
any further, or only, if I could just add one thing, I would like to figure out how to help this company further and grow in the town of Middlebury. But I don't think this tax stabilization policy can do that for where they are with their business right now. I think the revolving loan fund, as kind of proposed, envisioned at this point would be a better way to help them, and hope that when we're in our strategic planning, we could discuss how to move that along. Because I think it would be a better way to support them than this is really, I think the tax stabilization policy is really designed for those businesses in a point where they're growing the actual foundation, the building, and receiving a tax stabilization on improvements to the property, to building new construction. And that's not what's proposed right now. And I would like to find a way that we could do something to, so I just would make that comment.
Well, I would concur with that, that it's important to get the Economic Health Committee, or whatever we're gonna call it, going forward, up and running, and look at the revolving loan fund and the other recommendations of that task force. So, I concur.
I think even if we can't find the bodies and energy for the committee, that we try, my hope is that we try to find a way to establish and create a working revolving loan fund sometime in the next year as part of our strategic plan.
Right.
But I know there's a lot on that plan, so Kathleen's probably stabbing me in the back, right?
Jordan, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I prepared something that's okay.
Please.
I've written it down. So we appreciate and value the time this board and the task force has given to reviewing the existing policies surrounding incentives to new and existing businesses in Middlebury. Aqua IT is proud to call Middlebury home as a growing and community-minded company. With the growth comes challenges, and some of those challenges being financial, and we're happy to see that Middlebury had policies in place to support and incentivize businesses. So we applied to be considered for a tax stabilization incentive. It's been a long process, and I'd say an educational exercise for both the board and Aqua IT. This isn't a surprise that it's been educational, because this business incentive policy was written several years ago, and no one on the board had seen this type of application before, from what I'm aware of. A task force was created to review the policy and application, and the task force struggled through the intent and the purpose and the criteria for which to approve the application. Whether the ultimate decision is to approve or deny our application now is fairly immaterial to Aqua IT, being that it would only be a few $1,000s if it was approved. We have in part stayed with this application because it forces the question about what Aqua IT feels is a critical component of the health of Middlebury, and that question is, what type of incentives and resources should Middlebury have available to attract and retain businesses that have the potential to improve the character and quality of life here? So with that said, during the board's strategic plan offsite meeting, we hope that the plan includes a discussion followed by action regarding Middlebury's intent to promote the stability and growth of commercial and industrial enterprises, as we feel these businesses attract, retain, and have the potential to greatly improve the town's unique character, quality of life, and general welfare of its citizens. And lastly, I would gladly volunteer to work with a select board or a committee to review and discuss what type of incentives and the criteria used to help improve and attract businesses that are part of the lifeblood of a thriving community.
We'll sign you right up.
Yes.
Jordan,
Thank you.
that's really good input. We appreciate you driving us to this discussion, and it's really where we want to go as a board, and we needed a catalyst.
Sure.
And so thank you, and we will be taking you up on that,
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll make the motion to deny Aqua IT's December 31st, 2017 application for tax stabilization.
1 second.
Excuse me.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed? Okay, and Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, I do hope, I think this is a very important issue, and I would hope that the Tax Stabilization Committee will look at our policies and really, and then take whatever help you can get in recommendations. I'm sure there are others who have experience and recommendations to make, and I think we need to move toward a fairly sophisticated policy that that we can use, and I suppose when you finally come up with that, then you have to educate the rest of us so that we can apply it. But I think it is important. Of course, obviously, the point of having more industry in town is that they pay taxes, but also that they employ people, and those are the two goals, I would think. The opportunity for people to live here and support themselves and make a living, I think is I mean, that's what the town is here for.
It's just time. Just time.
No, I realize time is, I understand that. I'm very well aware of limitations of time. Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to say to Jordan's point that that's why I think the language economic health task force is good, because you're looking at the very things you're talking about. So you're looking at how you support the current businesses, and those could be technology improvements or planning improvements, strategic planning improvements, whatever. And maybe you'd be helpful in recruiting others like yourself to that committee or task force. That would be wonderful.
That's actually what's going on. Heather and I have had a little discussion on this, where we go next with this committee, and we've struggled to get to that next step. So we have, Heather's got some ideas, and we need to talk about them on our offsite. But we need to, if everybody agrees to prioritize it, that's kind of the way we're thinking, Laura, to head. So thank you very much, Jordan. Next is Memorandum of Understanding between Global Resource Options Grow Solar and the town of Middlebury regarding Grow Solar's designing, permitting, and construction of a 4.99 megawatt solar installation and battery storage project in the town of Middlebury on property located at the corner of Old Middle Road and Halliday Hill Road. Welcome.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me in. Sorry, so first, I'm Lincoln Landy, Director of Business Development with Grow Solar. Last time my colleagues were in here, Jordana and Alan, I was out of town, sorry I couldn't be here, but I hope you got the information you needed the first time. And I think since, just a quick update on where we are in the project, I think since they were last in here, we held a public site visit. Noticed all the adjoining landowners, some other community members came out, worked with Kathleen and Jennifer to get that all together, and largely I've had really good community input. As far as I'm aware, all the neighbors are on board now with the project and have been very supportive. So we feel that it's made good progress. Hopefully we get it across the finish line, but and the next step in that process is really working with the town to execute, a memorandum of understanding, laying out really the benefits to the town and what the project has to offer. And to that end, that's what we've tried to do here. I'm happy to delve into the project a little bit more too, answer any questions there. Big picture on the memorandum of understanding, there's a few specific things about the project that we've tried to lay out here. One is, I think you're all familiar, Old Middle Road runs through there, so we've tried to lay out, we'll have to work with the town public works to make sure, everything's done, in accordance with what would be town regulation for working in a right of way, anything of that nature. So working closely with them to make sure that's all put together correctly. A few other points, training for emergency service providers. That's something as Grow Solar always does. So Grow Solar is an EPC firm, meaning we build the projects that we develop as well. So after we build them, we provide emergency training to, usually it's the fire department, make sure that they know what to do in case of emergency. So just another benefit that we do after it's up and running. Bigger picture, municipal taxes, what we've tried to do. We're actually doing so backing up too, we're actually doing a very similar project with the town of Ferrisburg. So that's a little farther ahead than this one. They've actually executed a memorandum of understanding already as well. And we are submitting to the Public Utilities Commission. It'll probably be in the next few days for that project. And they actually have this same tax portion in here as well. So what we're really trying to do on the tax front is there's a lot of towns who have the taxes we pay are largely based off the municipal portion. We pay direct into the education tax fund, as well as we pay direct to the town, the municipal portion of the taxes. So what we've tried to do here is really, with the $40,000 minimum payment, really make it fair with the projects that we're doing across the state as to the amount of money that we're contributing to the local economy as well. So that's kind of the intent, the background to that provision, and where that $40,000 comes from. Another thing that we are looking to do with this project, as in Ferrisburg, committing to do pollinator habitat on the project. So that's really planting a seed mix from the start that encourages foraging birds, anything, bees, honeybees, anything of that nature to come to the property, and it's a wildflower type mix that attracts them there. So I mean, that's really the main pointers, I'd say, of the MOU, but wanted to, and I know and Kathleen can kind of correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the town attorney is reviewing right now the language to do any modifications that might be needed there, but wanted to get in front of you all, answer any questions I can about the project that may still be out there, or specifically about the MOU, if we need to do any tweaks there, and what it would take to move it towards execution, I think.
I had gone to the site visit and talked with Kathleen afterwards, so she's got all my feedback and said I'm sure she's working on all that, and it's part of what Public Works is working on in the town council, so thank you.
Yes, we are awaiting from a number of our different agents feedback, and we will review this as a board once we've kind of got all that feedback. We do appreciate you and your team coming in and keeping us updated on how the project's progressing, and I think that's important in working with us. I think right now we're at the point though where we need those reviews from legal and planning and zoning and our public works.
Right. Okay. Good. Yeah. And go ahead, Kathleen.
And to note, as Farhad pointed out, with the bills that he reviewed this afternoon, there is one from the attorney on the Grow Solar review. We had negotiated with Grow Solar that they would cover up to $5,000 of the town's legal expenses associated with the review. So.
Okay.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep. No, absolutely. I mean, and just, bigger picture where we are in the process too, in terms of permitting. So we won't submit, it's really important to us that we have an executed memorandum of understanding before submitting to the Public Utilities Commission. I think, we'll wait to do that, certainly. One thing that we would like to do maybe in the next few weeks to a month is just release a 45-day notice, which really, you've probably seen them before as well, which really just lets adjoining landowners and the town know that we're considering this project. And that's a precursor to any permit that we would be submitting. So it allows us, once everything's in place, to actually submit the permit. So just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page there and could move forward that way. And when we do release the 45-day notice, it'll specifically call out that we're working on a memorandum of understanding still as well. So.
Anyone else has gone besides you on the site?
I don't know. Well, there was
from our board.
planning commission members, there was neighbors.
can you accommodate another visit?
Sure, absolutely. I've hosted three separate site visits with adjoining neighbors as well. So yeah, absolutely happy to do that.
Sure,
Yep.
I'll appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next is an update on Forest Ridge Drive tree removal, and there's a email correspondence with Dan Delabrie, as well as any correspondence you may have had, Chris.
I have not received anything from him. This is the first I've seen of this letter that I believe you have in front of you. I would have some disagreements with his assessment of a few stumps were removed. In that statement, if he calls over 24 stumps as a few stumps, I would disagree with him on that. And I'm very sad to see that he writes at the end, at this point, we do not feel that there is any further action required from V-Trans. That they did not, there were several requirements to work in the town right-of-way that they did not meet. One of them was to not remove the stumps, because that's a very sandy hill, it's a very steep hill. And a few others that they did not meet, and I would hope that they would feel obligated to try and make us go the extra mile for us because of that lack of due diligence on their part, and they are obviously not doing that. I would have hoped that they would do a little more replanting on that site, but this is they aren't.
Chris, I saw him at the State House when I was up there to talk with Transportation Committee on the bridge project, and he said that the forester had looked at it and that he wanted to close out the project, and they didn't feel they needed to do anything. I suggested that some plantings would probably satisfy everybody. And he said, we don't want to plant something that's going to create future problems. Can we provide a recommendation of some lower growing shrubs or something?
There is numerous.
We would be acceptable with, and send a letter to them requesting.
Yes.
So that they could look at it with that regard.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess I would just wonder what forester they're referring to, because I know the county forester didn't go up there with them. Also, it's more of a soil issue rather than a growth issue, is really the concern. So I would say that they're talking to the wrong person in that situation.
I think Chris is ready with the information. The difficulty has been getting them to come down and talk with him, and for us to support him as the person that we feel is the expert. And Kathleen has done a very good job trying to make that happen, but I think the board itself needs to support the fact that we want them to get together with Kathleen and Chris and take their suggestions for what needs to happen.
Can we just, when we send them a letter, official letter, town
Yes.
letter?
I would love that.
Well, we've had this communication with them in person and have not
Yeah.
gotten it back.
I think it's time we put something on an actual letterhead and with what we are asking for, some specificity to it, that, if he's looking to close it out and end the budget that he had, we're not asking for a lot of money, I don't think.
I wouldn't think so, but this was a request we made verbally to them in person, and they said they would let us know by January, I think, correct?
Personally, I would say
Yeah.
that we should be asking either for a representative to come here and speak to the board, or to work with Kathleen and Chris in our stead, and leave it at that that's what we expect, because otherwise,
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to be spending your time
Right,
on this.
but to say that if you're not gonna meet with them, you gotta come talk.
So should I draft a letter for the board's signature outlining that and also including Chris's recommendations on plantings for your consideration?
Yes.
Isabel Turk, Forest Ridge Drive. The mat was laid down rather late in the year. It remains to be seen whether the seed that's gonna hold that soil is gonna come up.
Yes.
And they certainly obliterated any understory. And it's a small project, not that much money. But if you let them run over you here, what are they gonna do on the railroad underpass? If they think they can just blow you off, I don't know what the technical term is, but that's what I mean. I mean, that will set a precedent for how they deal with the town of Middlebury. I mean, that isn't a big area, you know, and something will grow there. Probably not anything good, but, or pines will reseed it, because they always do reseed right there in the sun and on that sandy soil, right?
Mhm.
So they'll have what they don't want, 120-foot tall white pine. But it will set a precedent.
If I may take, I know you're behind and valuable time, but just a quick note, emerald ash borer has now been found in Vermont, in Orange County, and it's been there for a while, but it's only just now appeared its evil head. Just to give you a quick, it's in 32 states in the Union. It's in 3 provinces in Canada. It has taken hundreds of millions of trees in the United States since it probably lodged here in 1990s. It was detected first in Detroit in 2002, and in that time, it's decimated several hundred million trees. So it's a force to be reckoned with, and we're gonna be dealing with it someday, and sooner rather than later. And I just wanted to put it on the select board's radar that it will be sooner.
It was on the news today.
Pardon?
It was on the news today.
Okay, I got an email from this state yesterday saying that they found it. So good. Yeah. So the word's getting out. But I won't take up any more time.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Sorry to have you keep coming back on this, but we've got to fix it, right?
It would be nice if they would just do the little bit extra. It's not, we're not asking for blood.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been really nice, but I guess that's.
Now they got to fix what they
didn't do right the
didn't
first
do.
time.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jim?
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Jim.
So I see down Delaware frequently, so I'd be happy to reinforce the board's concern about wrapping this up in the right way. So on to the Rail and Bridge project. Susan, it's a pleasure to present to you for the last time here and with an update. We're just about, tomorrow is March 1st, and by the time we roll to April 1st, Kubricki should be on the ground and things should be moving forward with our 2018 construction plan. As I mentioned to you when I was here last, the plan right now is that VHB and VTrans Kubricki would come to update the select board at your March 27th meeting. Seems like a good time as things are getting underway to review the 2018 construction plan and the impacts on the town that will follow during the course of the year. So we can look forward to that. What I'm here to talk to you about tonight is the grant agreement that you've received. And this grant agreement has 2 purposes. One is to provide a $75,000 grant to the town at our request to fund activities and events that are designed to support Middlebury's downtown business community and our religious and cultural organizations during 2018. And I want to stress that this is a one-year grant that we requested for 2018 so that we could get experience in the different events and activities that are that we would hold during 2018, measure the effectiveness of it, see if things actually played out well as we move forward into 2019 and 2020. We'll be with that kind of experience in hand. The grant agreement is set up to allow amendments in 2019 and 2020. So the expectation on our side and on VTrans's side is that we'll go back to them in both years with additional requests for funding. The feeling on our end was who knows what budget requests might be needed in 2019 and 2020. So let's take a shorter term view and get some experience with it. So with that in mind, right now, Neighbors Together, the community action group, has reconvened, and they are coming up with ideas for 2018 in collaboration with the Better Middlebury Partnership and with other project stakeholders. They will be here to present those ideas to you for the board's approval. Prior to that, they'll meet with Kathleen and with me and go over the plan here so it's vetted before it comes to the board. But I think there's some really exciting ideas ranging from downtown block parties to some other interesting things that I'll let them talk to you about when it comes to it. But so that's number one. The Neighbors Together would be responsible for executing the plan, and they would invoice the town for expenses incurred, and then the town would invoice the state, and that's how the $75,000 grant would flow to the state or to the town. The second half of the agreement is extending funding for my position through the end of the project. So the modified grant agreement that the board approved previously funded my position through the end of 2018. And we're now looking at 2021 as the end of the project. And so at our request, the state has extended funding for the community liaison position through the end of the project. It also gave me an opportunity to put down in writing kind of a full set of responsibilities for the community liaison based on our experience over the past 2 years. So that's captured in this document as well. Those are the two pieces of the grant. I think they're very, it's a positive move by the state to kind of support the work that we're all doing here in Middlebury. I wanted to add one final note here that Town Council has reviewed the agreement and has just made some minor suggestions for changes that will be incorporated into the final agreement that would be signed.
Questions of Jim?
Mine's just a protocol.
Comments? Yep.
Protocol one. How does this fit into having the position reviewed by the personnel committee? Because anytime we have a change and things like that, does that go through? I'm not sure.
I think that should be the next step.
Okay, but that's not. We don't need to wait for that in order to go forward.
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Is part of a motion, would we need to talk about the tweaks that are still talking about with council?
Yeah, you should say pending revisions recommended by council.
So I'll make a motion to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to sign a VTrans grant agreement extending federal and state funding for the Bridge and Rail Community Liaison position through the spring of 2021 and pledging $75,000 in state funds in 2018 to support downtown businesses during construction, pending legal review.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Was there something I was supposed to point out when we were talking about this? Was about what Neighbors Together was doing or BMP was doing? Remember our discussion? It was.
Yes, but I'm blanking on what it was that you were going to point out. I do. Do you recall?
Saved for another day.
Do you recall?
I think just to emphasize that we're working with them on this.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think,
This-
yeah.
Special meeting when you remember.
But I remember, yeah.
Well, you know, we're really looking, and we really appreciate everything they're doing, and we're looking for them to be the action agents and the volunteers, and so we're looking for it to come up, ideas to come from the ground up, and then we're just we'll have to fulfill all of our obligations for control and funding, but,
Right.
you know, it'll come up as a budget, and then we'll approve the budget, and then
Mhm.
our rules will allow them to go through Kathleen for everything that we've approved. It's under 3,000, and we'll only have to see stuff that's over that come back to us. That's kind of how that 75,000 will play out in support of the downtown.
So I'm
Okay.
excited to see some ideas and proposals.
Yeah, it's great. It's wonderful to see all this positive energy that's happening right now. And, you know, this group, which goes back, at least 2 years ago now, it's like, now we can go after it. You know, all these great ideas that we had to preserve and protect our town, now's the time. And so it's good to see that energy happening, and I think there are a lot of good ideas that will come back to the board.
Great.
Okay?
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Kathleen, budget.
Budget. So overall, bottom line, we're on track. We have some fixed expenses that we paid, so we're 66% expended 59% of the way through the fiscal year. I have some good news and bad news. Asked the chief of police for projection through the year end, and he thought with some budgetary adjustments, he might come in about $30,000 under budget. Knowing that we're having winter this year, I'll get to the bad news, and I talked to Bill Kernan about what he's projecting out through the year end, and he was projecting about a $30,000 overage in his budget, so those might wash out. So that's it on the general fund. On the water fund, also to note that we have had the cost of water leak repairs is driving the maintenance item well beyond budgeted numbers. We're looking at about a $15,000 overage in water main repairs. That's all I have on the budget reports.
Want to jump into town meeting preparation now?
Okay. So in your packet, you have an updated agenda, basically based on Ann's comments about the opening of the meeting, the introduction of the out-of-town residents. And that was all that I added to modified the agenda with. I also started work on the presentation for town meeting. You have a draft in your folders tonight. Please take a look at it and let me know if there's any errors, adjustments, or you have suggestions for improvement. If you could do that by the close of business on Thursday, that would be good, so that that's all set to go for the weekend.
Any questions on that? So this is the,
So I still have to get with you on the cruiser.
I made the
this
changes.
is in your,
Okay, but you said it
actually your
wasn't-
folder.
Yeah.
So this is the proposed slides, so if you could look
Okay.
at your part of it
So,
and
And
give
I
feedback
gave
to
you talking points
Kathleen.
by email.
See if you could look at all of it and see if you see typos or anything.
so it's still not, we are replacing 2 cars this year, right?
We are not. This year, in 2018, we do 2 cars. 2 cars on even years, 1 car on odd years.
So what was I thought his proposal was for a cruiser and like a service, like a chief car.
That's
Oh, but it doesn't, okay. Got it.
fiscal year 18, ordered.
Oh,
We're always ahead.
all right. Thank you. I'm in the wrong fiscal year.
Yep. Welcome back.
Okay,
You
so,
knew that, you just were checking.
so if you
I'm
do
what?
have
You knew that,
questions,
you were just checking.
Yeah.
let me, if you do have questions or comments on this, if you could get them to Kathleen soon.
Good.
Be appreciated, so, Farhad, check warrants.
Yes.
I'll just make a, I
Yeah,
was just
yeah.
looking at the agenda for town meeting, and, as I understand it, Article 6 is, transact other business proper to be done, that allows anyone in the town to come and raise an issue that might not be on the agenda, so long as it's proper business, or business proper to be done. What I'm concerned about is looking at the items. Laura is going to present the results of the poll, is that right? And
Just highlight stuff.
highlighted, all right. And then the second one I'm a bit concerned about, let's say the Addison County, or Addison Central School District budget overview. I attended the meeting of the Addison Central School District the other night, and it's a rather long presentation, and I hope that it will be abbreviated
It is,
for
that's
the
the,
town meeting.
It was last year. It-
that,
Okay,
that is the plan.
okay, all right. I'm just expressing the concern that, all right,
Yeah.
I've said my piece.
I do have a similar concern about the length of the presentation,
Okay,
but I do also think it's really important that people realize what the tax rate is going to be on
no, I think so. I obviously, and some, I mean, obviously, the purpose of, I mean, what the voters will be asked to decide is to vote up or down the school budget. And obviously, if they have, you know, they should inform themselves of what's in it. But my main concern is that we not extend this. It's not a hearing or an opportunity for question and answer about what's in the school budget. I think that the size of the budget and the tax implications are obviously what people will want to know. Yeah.
So does it make sense to ask Kathleen to communicate
Yes, I was
that with,
concerned of the board that,
that it be as brief as possible and that
um,
maybe the moderator's included and
yeah.
it's not intended to be a question and answer, but just information. Is that,
Very good, yeah. Fine.
that people should have gone last
That's
night
right.
That's right.
if they
and-
wanted to ask
yeah,
questions
yeah, I
and,
mean, it's one of the reasons for us moving
Right.
our meetings. So that,
right. And it was a long presentation, so.
Okay. Farhad.
I did the check review today. Besides what Kathleen mentioned about gross solar, everything seems to be in order. So I would like to move to approve the total expenditures in the amount of $320,171.95, out of which $215,414.61 goes to accounts payable, and $104,757.34 goes to the payroll.
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Town managers report.
Just briefly to note that I provided a copy of the VLCT legislative report, which includes an update on a streamlined open meeting law proposal that's currently before the legislature, and also several steps the legislature is considering in light of the recent mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, to improve safety and reduce violence associated with firearms. And that is it.
Okay. Go to board member concerns. Farhad.
Yes, I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Susan for sitting with me, putting up with me for a year now. Thank you. You've been very, very kind. You've been a mentor to me. And I wish you best of luck. We'll miss you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, I could say the same thing. I've been here more than a year. I'll keep saying it. No, I mean, we really do acknowledge your contribution, and we know that you'll be in touch with us. I'll be in touch with you. So I wanted to let the board know that the Public Health and Safety Committee will be meeting on March 19th, and we'll be looking at a lot of this discussion we're hearing right now around gun violence-related incidents. So, so just know that there will be discussion, and Chief Hanley has provided a lot of responses to me, to the media. You know, that'll be ongoing. We know that our school district has a response, which was in our packet, and that there'll be organized rallies this month that you'll be aware of, or if you aren't, you will soon be. So there's a lot of dialogue right now around how to respond to that, and what we want is Middlebury to be safe, and we want us to have good dialogue, you know, around this. So I just wanted to mention that. That's the intent, and that Chief Hanley emphasizes that really being able to have a good system for early warning signs is most important to him, you know, and that's what he's paying attention to most, and that's really great. And that he feels very fortunate that we have a good school resource officer, we have coordinated effort with our other emergency providers and social service agencies to do that. So we feel fortunate. We're also looking at parking enforcement, you know, and as we go into the summer especially, and along Main Street, and as we go into construction, and even without that, you know, as a way of making sure that people have a place to park when they're using our downtown. So that's something else that we'll be talking about, so I just wanted to mention that. And then related to town meeting, I'm looking forward to seeing people at town meeting, and I want you to know that the poll will be at town meeting. There's a town poll, and it's available now. You can complete it before town meeting, or as you vote. So, or take it home at town meeting and bring it back when you vote. So you don't have to complete it at the meeting. And we do welcome your input. It gives us a lot of useful information, including information on how town meeting itself goes. So because of the input we got last year, we've refined it this year, so your voice counts. So please let us hear from you.
Thank you, Laura.
Well,
Victor.
I mean, thank you, Laura, for doing the poll. I think it's very important, and the questionnaire. And Susan, thank you for.
Thank you, Victor.
That's all I have to say.
You want to wait for last?
I'm gonna, yeah.
Okay. Heather.
Just a couple of things. There is possibly going to be a Girl Scouts troop collecting food donations at town meeting as part of a Girl Scout project, and would encourage those attending to consider bringing a donation for our local food shelf via the Girl Scouts. And I think we are set up to have refreshments provided by the Mary Hogan Parents Group, MESA, as a small fundraiser for them and awareness for what they do while we're at that school. So I would just wanted to encourage those considering to come to the meeting, to come a little earlier and have a little refreshment and communicate with your neighbors that you might not see but once a year at town meeting. So I hope people join us, and I hope it works out, and we'll see how it goes. And then I just thank you, Susan. So
Brian, go could I just do a PS?
Give her my spot, go ahead.
Okay.
Take it.
No, because you reminded me, Heather, that when I was at the Hannaford Career Center open house, which was magnificent, by the way, they had a makerspace, you know, and in the makerspace, they invited Middlebury College students who are doing this Race to Zero, where they designed an elementary school, a new Mary Hogan. And it was really wonderful to see that, and I hope to invite them to town meeting to display their plan and for you to have a chance to see that and talk to them. So what they envision is a new building next to the middle school, you know, so it would open up the site at the rec park. I'm just saying, you know, not that we would do that, but it's an interesting proposal and something that you might want to think about.
And they had fantastic food.
Yeah. If I could add a PS that I'd forgotten, that I did attend that Hannaford Career Center open house, and it was fabulous,
It
and
was beautiful.
the food was very good.
Yep.
And just, we have such great resources here in our community, and I forget sometimes how wonderful they are, and thank you to all the people that make those happen.
Nick? This is a PS?
No PS.
The PPS.
No, yeah, I'll just add, you know, Susan, it's been an honor to be a board member with you. You know, it's interesting when you look at what we do, and, you know, we bring different viewpoints and different thoughts and approaches to issues, but there's a special camaraderie that really develops. We get these friendships, and it really is, it is a friendship. I mean, we enjoy the time together. You know, we struggle through solving some of the issues that come along, but we do it. And, you know, nobody knows exactly what it's like except those who've been in this position. And it is a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, but it's worth it. And so, you know, thanks for the time you put up. As I say, it's been an honor. It's hard to believe it's been 6 years?
6 and a half, almost
6.5
7,
years.
yeah.
I know, and when we first came on board, and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like just yesterday, but.
Alex was 7 and small, and he's not.
No. But you know, best as you move on with your other ventures, and of course we'll see you around town, because you're still our friend and our neighbor and a comrade.
Absolutely, thank you very much.
So I just want to bring the board up to date, and that remember there was a lawsuit that the town was named in with Vermont Gas on the Sentinel Insurance Company claim, and that case has been dismissed. So just to bring you up to speed on that, and to read that into the record, I guess. Did you want to say
I
something?
do.
Yes.
People have been asking me a lot lately about what it is to serve on the select board, and I've been saying this. I said, you work with people, and really it's your job to question them and to trust them at the same time. And it's a really interesting dynamic, because sometimes people don't like to get questioned, they just want to be trusted, and sometimes they just want to be, you know, have that, but it's our job to question each other intently, but also trust each other to get work done. And I really have enjoyed learning that lesson and questioning all of you and trusting you at the same time.
Well said.
That's a good point. So, you have for many years
Yes.
been the one who takes us into executive session, and I am looking to do it. We're gonna have to
I
draft
was
a
gonna say,
new person.
Whoever does it after me, big
It's
shoes.
big shoes to fill.
All right, so in accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of a pending legal matter would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its litigation strategy if it discusses the pending legal matter in public.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss a pending legal matter under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So we're gonna move into executive session at 9:25.